Ordering game. How do we know it's ordering? We've got 7 countries. The rules are saying before, after. So she's visiting 7 countries. It'd be really hard to visit 2 countries simultaneously unless you got 1 foot in each, and then you're going to have issues with the border guards. So most likely 7 different countries, 1 at a time. It's not explicitly stated, but it's a reasonable, common sense sort of assumption. Now, the rules say before, after. 2 countries exactly, before China, but after Bahrain. It's right away, before, after. And there's an immediacy there as well. They're not saying it's sometime before or sometime after. It's very specific. Same goes for many of the other rules. We have the rule about England and Djibouti, E and D, immediately, once again. In that case, cannot. Final rule, F is 4th or 5th. Super specific. So that level of specificity tells me this game is best viewed as strict ordering rather than relative. Relative being loose and strict being tight or specific. So first rule, we'll just diagram the rules one by one. Exactly 2 before China, but after Bahrain. So 2 before China. And after Bahrain. Then we have cannot visit Bahrain until she's visited Australia. So Bahrain has to go after Australia, meaning A before B. So I'll insert that in front of the B block. So A is before the B space C block. Then we have E cannot be immediately after D, nor D immediately after E. So they cannot go consecutively in either order. So I'm drawing out both possibilities and simply crossing them out. Neither one can happen. Finally, F is 4th or 5th. So I would do a split option here. F is on 4 or F is on 5. I put F//F to indicate 2 different possibilities. Either we have F on 4 and something else on 5, or we have something else on 4 and F on 5. So we're either in the world of things left of the slash or things right of the slash on slots 4 and 5 specifically. Any questions or comments around this up to this point? Was the second rule skipped? Thank you. Yeah, I did skip that actually. So C cannot be 7th. Concrete. And if C cannot be 7th, where can't B go? B as in Bravo. Yes, correct, Lindsay. B cannot go on 1 because A's got to go before. That's true. When we learn that C cannot be on 7th, what else does that tell us? So Alyssa's saying B can't be 7th. Anika's saying B can't be 4th. It can't be 5, 6, or 7. Those are all correct. Yeah, so B cannot be 7. It also can't be 6, 5, or 4 because we have to have something C coming afterwards. So we could put in tons of restrictions. We could say B cannot be 4, B cannot be 5, B cannot be 6. Actually, could B be 4? No, because C can't be 7. So we got to go even earlier. We could have B on 3, C on 6. That'd be fine. I might do something like saying, well, C can't be on 7. C could be on 6, in which case B would be on 3. C could be on 5, in which case B could be on 2. And then I also think, to be comprehensive about it, C could be on 4 and B, as in Bravo, could be on 1. The problem we'd run into then is, well, we've got to have A before B space C. So I think about, well, this could be 1, 4, 2, 5, 3, 6. These are just ideas I'd be playing around as I'm laying it out. How could I split it into multiple main diagrams, multiple main possibilities? Obviously, that one's out. So 2, 5, 3, 6. And then you can go specifically from there. But that's all beside the point, really. What I want to do is simply say, is it worth laying out all of this at the top, or is it not? It's a debate, right? Would I do that in practice on test day? Not necessarily. It's something to play around with. I'm personally biased in favor of doing a lot up front and then doing less over the course of the game. That might not be your style. So take a look at that blog post where I lay out tons of different things up front and see if you like it. Alternatively, you can go a more minimal approach at the start and then do more work over the course of the game. There isn't necessarily a right answer on this. It's about whatever your style, whatever about works best for your particular style of thinking around it. Alyssa's saying she likes putting numbers below rules. Cool. Yeah, that's good. That's a thing to play with. I might not do it for every single local hypothetical scenario, but I might do it at least for the main diagram. Then Ariel's saying that she likes to look at other questions and answer choices to eliminate possibilities for what could or could not go somewhere. So are you saying, Ariel, then to use previous work? Is that your style?
Yes, pretty much always, especially for those question types that are time sinks, like what must be true, what can't be true, those kind of just very vague general questions. So it's usually my approach for sure.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, no, I like to use previous work a lot too. If you look at my explanation videos, that's oftentimes what I do is I'll do the questions out of order. I'll jump around. I'll say that question 3's diagram might have helped me solve number 2, or question 4 might have helped me solve number 3, or maybe in order that works too. So 2 could help you solve 5. So from the top again, laying it out concisely here, C space space B. That's a block. C cannot go on 7. Then we have B cannot go until A has gone. So A before B. D and E cannot be consecutive in either order. And then we have F is either 4 or 5. You can say, like I said earlier, if C cannot be 7, B cannot be 4. So if you wanted to think about those possibilities, just to lay it out again, we could have B on 2 and A and C on 4, in which case A would be 1. Or you could have B on 3 and C on 6. I might draw out several rows of slots to cover those different possibilities if you wanted to at the start. But I'm going to go about the game as if I didn't have that to accommodate folks who have a more minimalist style jumping in. And then if you want the more broken down version, look at the article. So this is really all you necessarily, quote unquote, need up front. Big inference really being that you have A before the BC block, and then having something like B cannot go on 4. You don't need to do a ton up front for this game, although you can. Any questions regarding the setup? If not, we can go ahead and jump into the first question here, which is an orientation question, but one that has a little twist to it. And yeah, Liz, that's a great point. The A, B, C combination of rules takes up at minimum 5 slots, which is a pretty significant number out of 7 total. Yes, lots of consequences. So I might list out the 5 choices for the orientation question and work by process of elimination. So I would take one rule or inference at a time, apply to all 5 choices, and check it for violations. So we could take a rule to say, let's see, Alan's written out his reasoning behind the different choices. Fantastic. I'll still run through them anyway. Matthew says, would you take an inference first, given that it can eliminate 2 rules? Great question. I love doing that. I do that in so many of my videos. We can do it here too. I mean, what's the natural starting point for that? Which rules would you use being an inference? mean, Alyssa kind of alluded to it really with the A before B, C block. That could be a good starting point. So we basically say, okay, we have to have A, B, C in that order with exactly 2 spaces between B and C. So where don't we have that? Any choice where we don't have that happening, we can eliminate it. Do you see any choices violating that? Yeah, Mishan, exactly, C. So C has A before B before C, but only 1 space between B and C. So exactly, C is knocked out. And we've exhausted the usefulness of those 2 rules. The other 4 choices are good on both of those. So now we can go on to something else, something different. Mishan says she start with rule 2. Yeah, C, China cannot be on 7. Yeah, I like that one also because it's an easy one to check for. You just look at the last variable listed for all 5 choices. And as Alyssa says, E violates that rule, which has C on 7. No good. Fantastic. Samantha says F can be 4 or 5, so A stays in the game. Yeah, A is good on that. We could use that rule next, though, and see, okay, well, we've knocked out C and E. A, B, D remain. B has F on 4, and D has F on 4 as well. But Samantha and Matthew are both referencing the trick I put into this game about D. So yeah, we'll get to that, but I want to make sure we're testing all the simple rules first. So which rule haven't we used? As Anika says, yes, fantastic, Anika, D and E. D and E can't be together. They can't be consecutive in either order. That knocks out B. Now, most students at this point, we've exhausted the rules straightforwardly. Most folks at this point are pretty pissed at me. They think that there's an error in the game. They think I'm just being a jerk. In reality, and you'll see that in the blog, the comments in the blog version of this game and the explanation as well. There are so many comments saying, I don't get it, I don't get it, I don't get it. And as you folks have called out, it's that I listed one variable twice and left out another variable altogether. In choice D as in Delta, I've listed the variable D, Djibouti, multiple times. It's 2nd and 7th in that answer choice. Now they said, Chandra visits 7 countries. In choice D, she's only visiting 6 countries. So technically, it's like a violation of the very first sentence of the game. It's not in accordance with the initial setup, so D is out and A is the answer. Melissa says that she was in awe that I did that. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because you might think, well, LSAT would never do that, but could they? Would they? Have they made other games with radical twists in them? They have. It's not the most common thing, but it does appear from time to time. And those of you who have done Test 34, Game 4, the Ransborough-Suderton Clinics game, that is a game exhibiting a major twist in the fundamental nature of the game. Again, that's 34, Game 4, for those who might want to look that up. That makes my top 10 list of toughest games of all time. And this, what I did here in question 1, is not even fundamental to the game. It's just one question of one choice in one question in the game. And so it's really just a twist in terms of saying, well, once you've exhausted all the rules, what else is there? And the rules being the indented restrictions, but the initial paragraph can also contain really important information. So I would make sure to look there also when you're at a loss, given the indented rules. So for those wondering, A is the answer to question number 1. If nothing else here, let's move on to question number 2. If Chandra visits China 2nd, China 5th, could be true except. So there was a question about if X, what must be true earlier. This is really not that different. If C is on 5, then what must be false? Could be true except equals must be false. So if you've seen something happen even once, or you know it could happen at least once, you can eliminate it. So let's make a diagram. We'll put C on 5. And then what next? What can we do if we know that C is on 5? What's the next step? So we got folks saying that B's position exactly. So a lot of folks talking about B, work backwards. So if C is on 5, well, we know C there, right? Count back. B comes a few prior. So count backwards. Did I put C in the wrong place? C's on 5, count backwards. B is on 2. So B is on 2. What else can we say then? A is on 1. Exactly. So A is on 1. And then what else can we place? F on 4. You all got it. Fantastic. So C's on 5. F can't be on 5. F has to go on 4. Now we've already placed 4 out of 7 variables. We now have remaining, as Ariel said, either E or D is on 3. Then we have remaining the other one of D or E on 6 or 7, along with G. A lot of folks commenting. See Samantha, Matthew, Anika, Alyssa, perfect. So D/E are interchangeable with G on 6 and 7. So one of E or D will go on 3. The other one of E or D will go on either 6 or 7, interchangeably with G being on either 6 or 7. A lot of great comments in the chat supporting this. You all are right about it. So question then is, could be true except 4 of the choices could occur. 1 of them cannot occur. Find the 4 that you see happening here or possibly happening here, eliminate them, and whatever remains will be your answer. So could you have B on 2? Yes. So in fact, you must have B on 2. So A is out. Third country, Guatemala. No way. We know it's got to be either E or D, England or Djibouti. G has to go on either 6 or 7. Natalie's asking, how do you know G cannot be third? Because if G were third, we would then have D and E on 6 and 7 in either order. But the problem is they cannot be consecutive according to this rule right here. And that would force them to be consecutive. So for that reason, G's got to go later and one of D or E has to go on 3. Alyssa says she would directly look for choices mentioning G as in Guatemala. It's a great way to go. Yes, G as in Guatemala is slippery in this case, as you put it. It's relatively loose. You could also look for choices mentioning D and E as well, because there are some coulds about them to knock things out, but they have more flexibility. G's in Guatemala, in my view, is actually the most eliminated variable that is not explicitly placed. So I think, honestly, any of D, E, or G I'd be looking at because they're the ones that are most indirectly impacted. A, B, F, C are all fairly concrete. But I think just simple elimination is going to work perfectly fine too. To go through the others, as in choice C, third country, Djibouti. Yeah, that could happen. Totally fine. 6 countries, England, also totally fine. And then 7th is D, same thing, totally fine. But Guatemala cannot go third, has to go 6 or 7. Any questions remaining on this one? Let's go on to the next then. So if D is second and F is not fourth, the but in this question stem doesn't matter. But and mean the exact same thing. They're both conjunctive or connecting. But indicates a change in direction and indicates continuation, but in tone, but that doesn't really matter from a logical perspective. Either way, they're telling us simply both of those things are happening. So D is second and F is not fourth. What can we infer? F is 5. Fantastic. Then we have someone saying B is on 3. Yeah, that's absolutely right as well. The reason being that you want to share why, Anika? Why is B 3? How do you get there?
Because we went over that B can't be in 4, 5, 6, or 7, as well as 1. So if D occupies the number 2 slot, then it has to be in number 3.
Fantastic. Perfect. You nailed it. So B is 3rd. Then ripple effect, C is 6, as you said, leaving A to go on 1, as you said, Sarah. Perfect. Then we have remaining variables E and G. And are they interchangeable? Does it matter which goes where? Awesome. Yeah, so they're interchangeable. You could put that split option right there. E/G, G/E. Now you have could be true, except 4 things could happen. One of them cannot. For this, I simply like elimination. And since we have so much laid out here, it's actually pretty fast. G immediately before F. Could that happen? Yeah. So if we had G on 4, F5 works totally fine. So for that reason, A is out. Could we have G immediately after C? Meaning C, G. Yeah, works fine too. C6, G7, that could happen as well. Could we have Bahrain immediately before G? Yeah, that works too. That's basically like the flip side of choice A. Choice A said G on 4. Now we're saying E on 4. Actually, no, we're saying G on 4 again. Works fine as well. So that's out too. Then we have F immediately before G. Could that happen? Nope. Exactly, Matthew. Yeah. So Matthew, yeah, exactly. You got it. Because FC, Fiji, China, 5, 6, no matter what, that could never happen. We have ambiguity here regarding slots 4 and 7, but we have no ambiguity regarding 5 and 6. So D is our answer. On test day, you could pick that and move on because games are mathematical. There's not really the ambiguity of language. To be thorough, though, it would only take another second to look at E. So if you wanted to, I wouldn't blame you. And for our purposes now, I will look at that. F immediately after E. Yeah, if E was 4, F5, totally fine. So D is our answer for number 3. If no other questions on this one, we'll continue on. So if A and B are first and second, respectively, I was like, did I write respectively? Because if not, there's ambiguity there. But luckily, I did write respectively, so we're good. And respectively means in that order, by the way. So we have A1 and B2. How many different potential orders are there? Matthew's pointing out that we can use a previous diagram. Fantastic. You're absolutely right. We did have a case where we had A1, B2, then C5, F4, D/E on 3, E/D on 6 or 7, interchangeable with G. So you could just reuse that exact same diagram. We have it already available to us. I'm going to recreate it here. So C7, C's on 5, F is on 4. We have D/E. And then E/D along with G on 6 and 7. So how many different potential orders are there? This is where we get into a little bit of the math. I think there was a comment in the chat earlier about the how many questions. So we're dealing with permutations here. So it's really just related to what is the ambiguity here. By the way, I'll put a slash there just to make that more obvious that E and D and G are interchangeable in those last few slots. So we could have D on 3 or we could have E on 3. Those are two different major roads we can go down. Then from there, we have those two possibilities. We have yet more forks in the road we can go down. In either of those cases, we could have G on 6 or G on 7. That's it. Yes, you could say, well, if G is 6, then E is 7, or if G, on the left possibility and on the right possibility, G6, D7, G7, D6. But we don't even need to lay all of that out. Regardless, these are the four possibilities. You have two different ways D and E can go. Then you have two different ways G can go on either 6 or 7. So 2 times 2 is 4. That's it. And you could list them all to be really comprehensive and specific about it, but we don't need to do that for our purposes in particular. Are people getting this, not getting this? I'm happy to list them all out if you like.
Can you go back to that again, how you did the D3, E3, and just branched out from those two for clarity?
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, what I'm thinking about is when we're looking at how many possibilities there are, we're looking at what is open-ended rather than what's specific. So I don't need to be thinking about what's happening with A on 1, B on 2, F on 4, G on 5. All I need to think about is those remaining slots, 3, 6, and 7. So I'm starting with just what's on the left.
Oh, duh. Yeah.
Slot 3. So we could either have D as in Djibouti on 3 or E as in England on 3. Those are the first two roads we could go down. Then beyond that, we have to think about, well, what could be on 6? What's going to go on 6 and 7 respectively? So I could talk about E and D, but I'm not gonna, because that's just basically more open. It's more confusing to talk about because there's a lot of flexibility there. Like I'd rather just talk about G as in Guatemala. So I think, well, even if D is on 3, even if Djibouti is on 3, that still doesn't tell us where Guatemala is going to go. But if I put Djibouti on 3 and Guatemala on 6, I know where England's going.
England has to go. Yeah. Okay.
7.
Thanks.
If I put Djibouti on 3 and Guatemala on 7, then I know, well, England's going to go on 6. And it's fleshed out either way. Same goes for England on 3.
Got it. Thanks.
If you want to look at another game that kind of has something similar going on with very limited possibilities, look at test 37, game 2. It's a relatively simple, strict ordering game where the initial setup has a very limited number of possibilities at the outset. And you can concretely list them out in a very similar way to what I'm talking about here with this specific diagram for number 4. So test 37, game 2, I think it's with green and red trucks. That'd be a good one to look at if you want to see just how limited those permutations can be in some cases. You're going to find more limited scenarios like this for specific hypotheticals within a game, given the particular local restriction of this question, for example, A1, B2 limits things a lot relative to the initial open-endedness of the game as a whole, but 37 game 2 is unique in that way. So it's a good exercise to look at. But anyway, the answer to this one was 4 total possibilities, giving us D for those who want to close the loop on that one. Any questions related to the permutations idea? All right, if not, let's close out with number 5 here. So we've got the removal of a rule. You occasionally in the past have had rule addition questions. You also sometimes have rule subtraction questions. Test 33, game 2, has a rule addition question. That's the Birds in the Forest game. For those interested in those grouping conditional in-out games, like I was talking about earlier with Sarah, that's a game that has that element of conditionality, conditional chains, and has a rule addition question as the final question of the game. Then test 36, game 1, which is another conditional in-out grouping game, has a rule subtraction question as the final question of the game. Most commonly these days, you see rule substitution questions where you're replacing a rule. I taught a whole class on those recently. It's inside the logic games portion of the course. So here we are removing the restriction that C cannot go last. Initial setup, remember, we had that restriction on the main diagram. We are now eliminating that restriction. So we're saying that C could go on 7. And then, in fact, this question says, Chandra takes advantage of the opportunity to visit China last. That's a very eloquent way of saying, if I do say so myself, that she will go to China last on 7. So we're making a new local scenario where we put C on 7. But all other conditions remain in effect. Good news there, or else things would have gotten fairly complicated really quickly. So if C is on 7, now that it's allowed, what else can we infer? B4. Fantastic, Nishan. Exactly. So B is going to be on 4. As Ariana says, F is 5. Mishan says, well, Samantha says, well, fantastic. F is 5. Good stuff. So anything else we can say? A is somewhere earlier, right? A is one of the first 3. D and E cannot be together. G is somewhere. Guatemala is fairly open-ended, not a lot of restrictions there. So Maurice is saying D or E on 6. Sarah is saying E or D on 6. Is that a must? We've got remaining the variables A, D, E, G. Let's see, what if we did, I want to challenge that idea of D or E being on 6. What if we do this? Does that work? Yeah, it does. I mean, I'm just playing around here just to address the idea there, because I could see it'd be cool if we were able to go that far with it, but I'm able to make a scenario where we don't have that. So we actually can't go that far, but it was a good idea to play with at least. It's worth experimenting, especially when you're studying. So things really are just kind of open-ended here. We don't really know what else to do, so just stop. If we reach a natural stopping point, stop, and then see what are they actually asking us here. But based on C being last, we were able to put B on 4 and F on 5. Now, we're being asked, what could be third? Well, A could go there, D could go there, E could go there, and G could go there. All of our remaining 4 variables could go on slot number 3. In fact, any one of them could go on slot number 2 as well. Any one of them could go on slot number 1 as well. And then for 6, any of them except A could have gone there. Otherwise, would have been okay. So it's all remaining variables, A, D, E, G. So C is our answer for this one. Alyssa said, knock out the ones with B or F. Yeah, that's fantastic. So if you didn't have this list here and you were like, what else could I do to at least eliminate something? You'd say, well, look at what has been concretely placed. Obviously, anything including choice C as in China would have been ridiculous, but they didn't make it that easy. So you look at, okay, well, B and F. So you knock out, let's see, what do you knock out? D as in Delta has Fiji, and E as in Echo has Bahrain. You knock out those 2, at least you're down to 3. If you're down to 3, A, B, and C, you then say, okay, well, what are the differences? What's unique? Let's say you could knock out, if you could prove that D as in Djibouti could not have gone on 3, that would have knocked out choices A and C at that point, and you could have confidently chosen B if that were the case. It's not, but that would have been a way to play with it. Same goes for testing out E as in England. If you could prove E as in England would not be third, then you knock out B and C, and A would have been your answer. See, I had a request here from Alana and then some funny things in the chat about Alias versus Alyssa. Yeah. So Alana's asking, could you draw out the way you wrote the possibilities of where B could go underneath B? You mean from the top, Alana? Okay, cool. So Alana's asking if I could take a moment to just take a step back from this question and lay out the major possibilities for the game. I'm happy to do that, but I just want to first make sure there's no other questions regarding number 5 in particular. Anything on that one? No? You all are feeling good about it? Cool. All right, then I'm just going to take a moment to step back, lay out those major possibilities from the top. All right, so 7 slots. I'll lay out the rules real quick. A is before the B space C block. D and E cannot go consecutively in either order. C cannot be last. F is on 4 or 5. So, question is, different places B could go. I mean, I really might actually start with thinking about C as in China, because we said C as in China cannot go 7th. So I work backwards from there. We could have C on 6, and then counting backwards, B wouldn't be 5 or 4, it would be 3. Or we could play with, and I'll make slots to make it a little bit easier to read just for illustrative purposes. Or we could have C counting backwards again on 5. In that case, counting backwards, B wouldn't be 4 or 3, it would be 2. And in the case where B is on 2, we could say concretely that A would be on 1. Then you could say when C is on 5, F would then concretely be on 4. Then this top level, you have either D or E is on 3, and then E/D is on 6 or 7, interchangeable with G. Kind of like that. The other possibility with C on 6 is a little bit more open-ended. And if you do this up front, then having that top scenario, you saw it relates to a couple of the questions. It relates to number 4 specifically, where you have A and B on 1 and 2 respectively. It also relates to question 2, where you have China on 5. So it could have helped you out there from the start, allowing you to avoid having to draw those over the course of the game. And yeah, counting backwards is something to get used to. We usually think left to right going forwards. So it could require some reworking to go the other way. But if you can, certainly useful to do. Matthew, question, comment?
Yeah, just a question. At the end of the game, I see that you have a difficulty or a difficult version of it where a lot of them use the same variable. Now, would you put the first 2 characters or would you put a 1 and 2 under them just so it doesn't get super difficult where it's like, okay, is that an AR, is that an AP, and, writing fast?
No, great question, Matthew. Yeah, so Matthew's referring to, I basically, to put yet another twist onto things, I thought, well, what would happen if they made a game where almost all the variables have the exact same letter at the start? So I wrote a version of this game that's identical in its logic, but looks different because I made all the variables either start with the letter A or the letter D. But I put like A is for either Athena or Artemis, things like that. So you could have, I would do the first 2 characters. So you could do A-T for Athena, and then I don't even remember the variables, but if let's say Artemis was a variable, you could do AR. I like to be as literal as possible. To do numbers like A1, A2, you're then thinking, well, 1 equals T and 2 equals R. Too much translation involved for my takes. I like to keep it as simple as possible, being as literal as possible. Just like when I'm diagramming, even in logical reasoning, I wouldn't suddenly start doing X, Y, Z, or A, B, C unless they were actually the proper nouns or names of the variables I'm dealing with. And so in a game, a logical reasoning question, for example, there's a parallel one involving April rainfall. I would do AR for April rainfall, or I would do APR for April. I wouldn't start doing X, Y, Z to map the logic abstractly. I would keep it as close as possible to what I'm dealing with. Any other questions or comments about this game in general or about games in general? Well, folks, this has been a fantastic class. Thanks for all your great questions and engagement. I felt like you guys really engaged a lot and really owned this. I loved all the flow that we had in the chat about going through the different problems and everything and carrying forward those logical deductions. So very cool to see that. You're all doing great. Keep at it. Love your feedback as always. Reach out via email, just respond to my emails or leave a comment in the chat. I'd love to know what you thought of this format of this class. Always looking for feedback to change it up for the future. Tomorrow night, we've got logical reasoning, role of statement questions. I'll be going over the review process as well as playing with some different stimuli from different perspectives, mapping them as role of statements. So hope to see you then tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern. In the meantime, everybody, be well and have a good night. Thanks for joining.